The scream echoed through the marble hallways of Westfield Academy, and what Madison did next made national headlines. In less than 24 hours, the school's star quarterback was expelled, a revered teacher was arrested, and a 12-year-old cover-up unraveled in front of an entire nation. But at the heart of this storm was a young black scholarship student named Madison Brooks, a girl with a fiery sense of justice and a will of steel. She arrived at Westfield from a modest background, determined to prove herself and to earn the scholarship that could change her life. What happened next would shake the privileged corridors of the school, expose deep-rooted alliances, and force the community to confront why no one stepped in when a new girl's hair was callously hacked off by 3 wealthy classmates. But how did a single act of humiliation escalate into a scandal that would haunt Westfield forever? Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. If you fight for justice and you think the Bullies has no rights to humiliate the girl, hit the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. But if you think they have every rights to humiliate her without cause, comment your thoughts below. And don't forget to share the video to those who also fights for justice. I can feel the weight of the hallway even now, my heart pounding, every footstep echoing off those polished floors. I remember first laying eyes on Chase, Tyler, and Brandon, sons of legacy, dripping with privilege, their smiles polite but calculating. I sensed their stories were written long before I ever set foot at Westfield. Family names on plaques, alumni photos on the walls. And then there was me, Madison Brooks, a scholarship kid, just trying to survive. I remember asking myself in the car on my first day, why was I here? Was it just opportunity, or was I unknowingly stepping into something much larger? I noticed the way those 3 moved together, like a unit nobody could challenge. Chase with his easy swagger and quiet authority, Tyler always filming on his phone, and Brandon, his eyes always searching, always sizing me up. They didn't just bully me, they were hunting. I started asking myself, what secret were they protecting? What had happened in those corridors before I arrived that made my presence a threat? Then the questions began to churn inside me. Why was I transferred to Westfield? My mother had fought tooth and nail for my scholarship, but I can't shake the feeling that someone higher, someone who didn't know me as the quiet, earnest black girl from Oakwood, pulled a string behind the scenes. Did someone see me as a stone in their shoe? And those boys? What were they hiding? I spent late nights scrolling through yearbooks, school board minutes, alumni articles. There were whispers, unexplained transfers, hushed faculty meetings, a pupil who left mid-semester years ago, a missing piece of Westfield's carefully cultivated image. Then came the morning of the haircut. I walked into class expecting another normal day. The hum of the fluorescent lights, the rustle of papers. I was so focused on keeping my head down, not drawing attention, but I felt Tyler's gaze before I heard the scissor snap. And when I glanced up, I saw Chase grinning, Brandon inching closer, hair clutched in his hand, scissors poised. My breath caught, shame burned hot in my chest, not because I was embarrassed to lose a chunk of my hair, but because the entire room watched and laughed. My voice faltered, fear, betrayal, anger, all tangled. I felt every eye on me, every whisper that followed. In that moment I realized, this isn't just school torture. This is a message, and it's not only to me, it's to anyone who thinks they belong somewhere they weren't born into. I won't lie, I broke down when I got home. I stared at my reflection for hours, touching the jagged line of blonde strands, wondering how they thought it would feel to be erased on a whim. But then something shifted. It didn't hurt so much because they cut my hair. It hurt because they believed they could own a piece of me, erase part of my identity, and nothing would happen. That thought ignited something inside me, a flame I didn't know I had. What if I didn't just step back into silence? What if I stepped forward into action? I reached out to Ava, the only kid who had looked at me with genuine concern before the incident. I emailed a local journalist under a false name, attached the video Tyler had posted, the one that already had hundreds of views. I walked into the principal's office and told them exactly what happened. Every detail, no filter. no shame. I felt exposed, raw, but also stronger than I'd ever felt. And outside, the storm began to gather. But before the school investigation could begin, another drop fell into the glass. As I dug, I found Janelle's name, an honor student who vanished 12 years ago after a similar case of bullying. Her file was gone. There was a note that said, "Transferred special circumstances." It reeked of hush money and panic. I could feel a rage building. This wasn't my fight alone. This was Westfield's rot spreading through generations. I pressed on. I slipped a copy of my findings to the journalist. I told Ava what I found, and then suddenly everything blew open. The school couldn't run from it anymore. Chase and Brandon were suspended. Tyler's video was plastered across social media. Mr. Sullivan, the beloved teacher who'd always been just a little too protective of Chase's older brother, was named in court documents. A teacher arrested for covering up. Connections unveiled between that missing girl and my own case. All because I finally said out loud, "Enough." I want you to carry this feeling with you. The moment you decide your voice matters, and your body, your hair, your story belong to you. Nobody else. You'll feel fear. You'll feel anger. But I promise, you'll feel power too. And that power changes everything. I was born in a small brick apartment on the west side of Chicago, raised by my mother, a woman who worked 3 jobs just to keep the lights on and keep me in school. Every morning before dawn, I'd grab her hand and walk through the empty streets to catch the bus. I learned early that the world didn't owe me anything, and that sometimes your worth depended on how much you fought to be seen. When I earned that scholarship to Westfield Academy, it felt like validation, a chance to prove not just to them, but to myself, that hard work could open every door. But stepping onto that manicured campus under a sky so blue it looked unreal, I realized I was the only thing that didn't belong. The whispers started the moment I flashed my school ID. I heard their breaths catch, saw eyes narrow with suspicion. Yet with each encouraging nod from a teacher, I told myself, "You're exactly where you should be." In those first weeks, I learned how to navigate a world built on silent expectations and inherited power. Teachers introduced me with bright smiles. Madison, our star pupil. Meanwhile, students watched like animals size each other up, heads tilted, phones poised. I'd study in the library during lunch, burying my nose in books, ears straining to catch the hush of conversation when the bell rang. Chase always sauntered by with that quarterback swagger that said, "I own this place." Tyler was never far behind, phone in hand, ready to capture anything worth laughing at. And Brandon, his gaze was colder, silent but sharp, like he was weighing my value before deciding it was negligible. In those moments, I felt raw anger bubble up, a kind of fuel that kept me steady when they tried to shake me. I didn't trust them, didn't want to be part of their world, but I had to survive in it. Then I started to see the cracks, details nobody mentioned, files that disappeared from the archive, a teacher stopping mid-sentence, eyes flicking away when I asked the wrong question, the librarian whispering about old scandals, but shutting her mouth when I came near. In the faculty office, I once overheard a voice, soft but urgent, mention transfer, incident, and sealed. I froze in the hallway, my heart pounding. It was the first time I realized this was more than schoolyard politics. This place had secrets, carefully locked away behind good grades and fancy trophies. And I thought, what if I'm here for more than my scholarship? What if I'm here to unearth something that everybody thought they'd hidden for good? They say prep schools are breeding grounds for privilege, grooming the next generation to run corporations, courts, and conventions. But privilege also has a dark side. It protects what it doesn't want to be seen. And for the first time, I felt like I wasn't just surviving. I was standing at the edge of a truth that someone, somewhere, had been desperately trying to hide. I didn't just walk into a prep school. I walked into a cover-up. I remember the morning of the incident as if every second is etched into my bones. I walked into chemistry like I did every day. Textbook in hand, mind on the lesson, heart trying to stay calm. But the air was heavy, like a storm waiting to break. I felt Chase's eyes before I even reached my seat. I heard Tyler's quiet chuckle as I passed them in the hallway, one hand flicking a note into my locker. Inside, a taunt. "Scholarship girl, don't pretend you belong." My hand shook, but I swallowed my fear. I thought, just get through this. Then lunch. The tray tipped when I walked by, quinoa spilling over my sneakers. Heads turned. Laughter buzzed. That's when I felt it. I wasn't invisible. I was a target. Then came chemistry class. The overhead lights flickered. I half heard Tyler ask a question, voice slicing through the soft scratch of pencils. I looked up. He was leaning over the teacher's desk, pointing at the periodic table. I didn't think twice. But behind me, Brandon dropped his notebook with a loud thump. The teacher turned. And Chase. Chase snuck in close, slower than a shadow. His hand came down on my ponytail. Then scissors. Sharp. Cold. The tier of hair felt like a betrayal against my very being. I closed my eyes, felt the weight shift as he cut a chunk, thick, dark curls scattering on the blue lino floor. The class erupted, gasps, then laughter. My heart felt hollow. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stood up, picked up my bag and walked out. Every laugh felt like a punch to the gut. My breath came fast, body taut. I wanted to run, but I didn't. I walked. I felt the corridor's lights blur, the polished floors reflecting my distorted reflection. That morning I realized something critical. This wasn't just bullying. This was a performance, made for them and for anyone else who believed they owned me. I didn't go to the principal that day. I didn't get help. I went deeper. I spent the weekend with Ava, watching the video Tyler uploaded online. It had gone viral inside days, not because they thought it would, but because social media never sleeps. Ava hovered behind her laptop, face pale. "They can't get away with this," she whispered. I nodded, feeling something twist in my chest. Anger, fear, resolve. That night, I emailed a local reporter under a pseudonym. I attached the video. I told my story as truthfully as I could, my fingers trembling on the keyboard. As I hit send, the world felt colder, realer. Monday came. The school buzzed with rumors. Chase's smirk was gone. Tyler's phone stayed in his pocket. Brandon avoided eye contact. The principal called it an isolated incident, but families were talking. Parents were calling. The reporter reached out with questions. I answered. Every time my voice shook, I reminded myself, this is bigger than my fear, bigger than their laughter. Within days, the school administration suspended all 3 boys. A federal investigation opened. The alumni board held secret meetings. Mr. Sullivan, beloved teacher to many, was suddenly questioned. I felt vindicated, yet terrified. Exposing them felt like ripping off a bandage, raw and painful, but necessary. I'd stepped into a fight I never expected, but in that fight, I found my voice. I found power in shame, and I found the courage to shine a light the school had tried to keep hidden. What happened next would get 3 students expelled and shake Westfield's legacy to its core. I didn't speak for weeks, not to the teachers, not to the other students, not even to my mama when she called at night asking how school was going. I just kept saying fine, like I hadn't been split open in front of a room full of people who treated my pain like entertainment. Truth is, silence was the only armor I had left. After that haircut, after the humiliation, after seeing my own curls on the floor like roadkill, I didn't feel human no more. I felt like evidence, like proof of how far some folks would go just to remind a black girl she don't belong. But I wasn't finished. See, when the fire quiets down outside, it starts burning hotter on the inside. And that's what happened to me. I stopped trying to fit in. I stopped trying to walk with my head down. Instead, I went digging. Not just for revenge, but for truth. For whatever this place, Westfield, was really hiding. The first place I went was the school library, not the new one with the polished floors and Starbucks vending machines. I'm talking the old library, down in the basement. The one they barely kept unlocked, where the air smelled like wet paper and forgotten time. I used to think that place was creepy, but now it felt honest. Honest in its dust, in its silence, in the way the shelves leaned like they were tired of holding secrets. I spent every lunch there, flipping through yellowed yearbooks and dusty faculty records. I was looking for anything, patterns, names, accidents they didn't call accidents, and that's when I found her. Simone Brooks, class of 2013, a name that popped up again and again in the margins of old student newsletters. Debate champion, National Honor Society, scholarship student, just like me. Then right before graduation, gone. No explanation, just one sentence in the yearbook. We wish Simone the best in her future. No senior quote, no goodbye photo. That ain't how students vanish, not unless someone wants them to. That's when it hit me. Westfield didn't just mold perfect students. It buried the ones who didn't fit the mold, and I was next in line, unless I became too loud to erase. While I kept searching, Ava took her own risk. She uploaded the video, not to her account, but through a burner. No name, no tags, just elite prep student assaults black classmate and a timestamp. It took hours to spread, then a day, then it caught fire. I remember walking into school the next morning feeling like I was wearing someone else's skin. Whispers were louder than usual. Phones lit up under desks. Eyes followed me, not with laughter this time, but with something closer to fear. The school tried to kill the flames. Teachers started warning students, if you share this video, you could face suspension. They called it slander, said it was taken out of context, but the damage was done. The world had seen what they did, and some folks weren't willing to let it slide. That's when I started leaving notes. Real quiet. Slipped under the back door of the local news station. Tips about what I found. Simone, the disappearing grades, how certain teachers only lasted a semester before resigning. For personal reasons. I didn't sign my name. I didn't have to. The truth don't need a signature to be real. But the pressure was mounting. Tyler was the first to crack. Claimed it was peer pressure, said he didn't mean no harm. Brandon told someone it was just a joke. Like my body, my dignity, was something to play with. But Chase? He stood in front of the press with a crooked smile and clean-cut lies. Denied everything. Said I was making it up for attention. That's when the second voice came forward. Her name was Raina. She had graduated 5 years before me. And she had a story too. Different details, same blueprint. Chase and his boys had cornered her in the gym locker room. Told her she owed them for taking up a spot that was meant for one of their own. She tried to report it. The school said, don't ruin their futures. Sound familiar? That's when the police stepped in. They didn't come with sirens. They came with notepads and subpoenas. Quiet, professional looking behind the curtains. The school panicked. Board members started stepping down. Counselors who never saw nothing suddenly remembered everything. And I kept feeding the fire. Names, records, things I found that no 16-year-old should have to know about. But through all of that, I still felt alone. I'd walk the halls and hear silence where laughter used to be. Teachers who once smiled at me now avoided my eyes. Some students whispered, traitor. Others whispered, hero. But none of them knew what it felt like to sit in your dorm at 2 a.m., scared that someone might retaliate, to hear footsteps outside your door and wonder if it was just another student or a warning. Every day, I questioned if I'd done the right thing. Then one night, I found a folder tucked behind an old filing cabinet in the archive room. It was labeled, Disciplinary Confidential. Inside were names, photos, written complaints that never made it to the light. But what made my hands go numb was the name at the bottom of the list. Principal Hendricks. See, everyone thought he was new, brought in just a few years back. But according to this file, he'd been on the faculty for over a decade, started as a dean, quietly shifted departments, and when Simone vanished, he was head of student affairs. It wasn't just the boys who tried to erase me. It was the system that groomed them to think they could. So I made a choice. I exposed him too. Sent the file to the same journalist I'd been contacting. No filter, no blur, just facts, dates, documents. And when that article went live, Westfield's legacy of silence, the school couldn't hide behind money no more. They suspended Hendricks, opened an internal investigation. Parents started pulling their kids out. Donors backed away. The facade cracked, and I was the one who split it open. But victory don't feel like a parade. It feels like sitting alone at lunch while everyone else avoids your table. It feels like watching your mama cry when she sees your name in the news and realizes what you've been carrying. It feels like sleeping with your sneakers on, just in case you need to run. Still, I'd do it again. Because no girl, black, brown, or any shade in between, should have to choose between silence and survival. And I made my choice. But no one expected who I would expose next. Not even me. Because the deeper I went, the more I realized this wasn't just about me. And the next name on that list was Ava's father. Want to hear how that unfolded? I remember the moment I found the tape like it just happened yesterday. The room was cold. Colder than usual, like the air itself was trying to whisper, "You're not supposed to be here." I had gone back into that dusty basement archive one last time. The kind of place where time don't move forward. It just loops, like the pain it hides. I had no plan that day. My hands were tired, my spirit too. But I had this ache in my chest that wouldn't let me stop digging. And I think a part of me was hoping I wouldn't find nothing. 'Cause truth hurts more than silence ever could. The tape was in a rusted metal box labeled AV Club 2012, covered in mildew, almost stuck shut. VHS, not digital, not filed in no system, just left behind like someone wanted it to disappear with time. But when I played it, my knees buckled. The footage was grainy, black and white. The audio crackled like it didn't want to be heard. But I saw her, Janelle, dark skin, soft eyes that looked like they cried too often. She was sitting in a classroom, speaking to someone off camera, and she said something that made my blood go cold. I told Mr. Sullivan what Chase's brother did. I begged him, and he told me to stay quiet, 'cause the school's reputation was more important than my story. Chase's brother. That's when it clicked. This wasn't new. This wasn't about me. It was a cycle, a legacy of pain passed down like a twisted family tradition. Chase ain't just some bully who lost control. He was groomed, protected, taught how to get away with it by the very same teacher who buried Janelle's cries a decade earlier. Mr. Sullivan, still teaching, still smiling, still acting like he believed in fairness and truth. But that tape, it proved what he really believed in: silence, secrecy, and protecting power. I held that tape in my hands like it was a weapon, and in a way, it was. When I gave it to the journalist, my fingers were trembling, not because I was scared of what would happen next, but because I realized I was holding the last words of a girl they erased. Janelle never graduated, never came back after that semester. They told students she transferred, but I knew better now. When the tape aired on national TV, everything changed. Mr. Sullivan was arrested within days for obstruction of justice, failure to report abuse, and professional misconduct. The news stations ran his mugshot side by side with quotes from his old speeches. "We create leaders here." That's what he used to say. But all he ever created was silence. The school board scrambled like roaches in a lit-up kitchen. Suddenly, every administrator was unaware of what went down. Suddenly, documents vanished. Emails couldn't be located. But it was too late. Ava's video had gone viral, and now, the tape. That was gasoline on the fire. Chase's family lawyer, slick man with shiny teeth and soft hands, tried everything, claimed the tape was fake, claimed Janelle was emotionally unstable, tried to file motions to block the media. But there was too much, too many voices, too many wounds reopened, and then they called me to testify. I had never stood in a courtroom before. But the moment I stepped up to that witness stand, everything around me faded. The walls, the people, even the sound of my own heartbeat. It all faded. All I saw was her, Janelle. In my mind, sitting in that chair, her voice shakier than mine. I spoke slow, clear. No tears, no theatrics, just truth. I wasn't just fighting for myself, I said. I was fighting for every girl like me. Every girl who's been told to keep quiet. Every girl who walked into a room full of people who looked at her like she didn't belong and still showed up anyway. There was a silence after I spoke that felt different than all the others. It wasn't empty. It was full. Like the whole room finally heard something that had been whispering for years, but no one wanted to listen. They found Sullivan guilty. He lost his license, his pension, his reputation. But that wasn't justice. Not really. Justice would have been Janelle still having her voice, her dreams, her future. But at least now, her story was finally told. And Chase? He didn't get prison time. But he was expelled. His family moved out of state. They said it was for safety reasons. But the truth is, they couldn't walk down the street without hearing whispers. Even now, I don't feel proud. I don't feel victorious. I feel tired. Some nights I still wake up in a cold sweat, remembering the weight of those scissors in my hair, the echo of laughter in that classroom, the silence afterward. But then I remember the look on my mama's face when she saw me testify, her eyes filled with something more powerful than pride, something closer to healing. And that's why I keep speaking, not because I want to be strong all the time, but because I know what happens when we don't. We become ghosts in someone else's story, background characters in the place we were supposed to shine. Janelle's not a ghost no more. She's the reason I kept going. She's the reason I knew silence was never safety. It was a trap. And now, the truth's out. But there's one more thing. One name I ain't spoken yet. The person who started all this. The reason I ever got that scholarship. The reason I ever ended up at Westfield. My father. But that's a truth for another time. When you're ready to hear what he did, I'll be here. They say when a storm passes, you're supposed to feel relief. But all I felt was stillness. Not peace. Stillness. Like the moment after a scream when the air goes heavy and thick and everybody's just waiting to breathe again. That's what it felt like once the dust settled. Chase, Brandon, Tyler, they were gone, expelled. Faces wiped from the school's website like they were never part of the Westfield legacy. Mr. Sullivan resigned before they could fire him, but that didn't stop the charges. Obstruction, misconduct, conspiracy. I watched the news that night in my mama's kitchen, the glow of the TV flickering against the tile as the words, "Educator under fire," scrolled across the bottom. But you know what hit hardest? The school never said a word. Not to me. Not to Janelle's family. Not to any of us. They released a cold, sanitized statement. We remain committed to the values of safety, respect, and academic excellence. Not one mention of what really happened behind them doors. Not 1 ounce of accountability. It was like they wanted the world to think it was all handled, all clean and done. But truth is, it was just the beginning. I remember sitting on my bed that night, legs tucked under me, laptop screen glowing in the dark. I was supposed to be celebrating. A women's justice organization had offered me a full college scholarship, full ride, tuition, books, housing, everything. The kind of thing girls like me dream about but rarely get. But I didn't feel joy. I felt haunted. 'Cause while I got the spotlight, the scholarship, the survivor title, so many others stayed quiet, and I couldn't sleep knowing that. So I started writing. At first it was just for me, like therapy. I wrote about what happened in room 217, what I saw in Mr. Sullivan's eyes when I testified, the way my hands still shook in locker rooms. But then I remembered something my therapist said once. Pain isolated is pain repeated. Pain shared becomes history. So I started the Westfield Files. Anonymous at first, just a blog. No name, no photos, just truth. But the truth has a way of echoing. Within a week, I got my first message. A girl named Naomi who'd graduated in 2010. She said she was silenced by the same counselor I was assigned freshman year. Then came Darnell, a boy who'd been forced off the basketball team after speaking out about racism in the weight room. Then Emily. Then Rosa. Then dozens more. Stories I couldn't even wrap my heart around. Pain that had been boxed up, taped shut, and buried beneath smiles in the school's glossy brochures. They called it voices they tried to silence. It wasn't just a blog anymore. It was a reckoning. Each post was a new revelation. Not just what happened to them, but how it happened. The patterns, the cover-ups, the teacher warnings that were never followed up, the cameras that just so happened to malfunction. You start seeing the system for what it really is when you step outside the lies it feeds you. And let me tell you, Westfield wasn't broken. It was built this way. See, folks think justice is a gavel, a verdict, a headline that says case closed. But real justice? It's messier than that. It's sleepless nights and long talks with lawyers who say, you might not win, but you're not wrong. It's standing in front of a camera knowing you gonna be called everything but a child of God. It's losing friends who ain't ready to hear the truth cause it makes them uncomfortable. Justice ain't a finish line, it's a path, lonely, winding, unforgiving. And just when I thought I could start moving on, I got hit with the final blow. Chase's father. He launched a campaign called Protect Our Sons. Billboards, websites, Facebook groups. Claimed his boy was the real victim. Called me vindictive. Said I weaponized womanhood. Had a lawyer draft up a case for defamation. They ain't file it, but that wasn't the point. The point was to scare me back into silence, but I'd already burned the box they put me in. I remember walking past one of his signs, bold red letters on a white background. False accusations ruin lives. And I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because that's the oldest trick in the book, ain't it? Turn the accused into the victim. Turn the survivor into the villain. But he didn't know. I wasn't fighting alone no more. By then, the Westfield Files had hundreds of subscribers. Teachers, alumni, students from other schools reaching out, sharing their own stories. Local news picked it up, then national media. Suddenly, that anonymous girl behind the keyboard became a voice for the voiceless. Not because I was the bravest, but because I was the one who'd had enough. And now I'm still here. Still writing, still speaking, still fighting. College came and went. I graduated with honors, spoke at commencements, sat on panels, wrote a book. But some nights I still wake up gripping the sheets like I'm in that classroom again. Like the laughter's echoing through the walls, like the silence is back to swallow me whole. But I remind myself, that silence don't own me anymore. I own my voice. And if you're listening to this, if you've ever felt unseen, unheard, unbelieved, I need you to know, you're not alone, you're not crazy, and your story matters. Justice may not come how you expect it. It may not come through the front door with a ribbon on it. Sometimes it shows up through a blog post, through a cracked voice on a witness stand, through a trembling hand holding a worn-out tape. But when it comes, you'll know. Not by what changes around you, but by what finally changes inside. So I leave you with this. What happens when institutions protect their own at the expense of justice? You build your own institution, one story at a time. Have you ever trusted someone so much only to realize they never really saw you? I have. And that kind of betrayal, it don't just bruise you, it reshapes you, like bone breaking and setting wrong. You walk different after. When the expulsion letters came and Mr. Sullivan stepped down, people thought that was the end. Thought that was the part where the camera pans out, the screen fades to black, and the credits roll over some soft music. but endings feel different when you're the one still living through the aftermath. I remember sitting on that porch swing out back, the wood creaking beneath me, watching the wind drag dead leaves across the grass. Autumn had come fast that year, like even the trees were tired of holding things in. My hands were wrapped around this chipped coffee mug Mama kept, and I could feel how still the world had gotten. No school bells, no locker slams, no whispers behind my back, just the sound of silence, and the ache of everything I hadn't said out loud yet. You see, when the truth finally comes out, it don't heal you right away. It exposes you. You feel raw, like the truth stripped you of the little armor you had left. And then comes the fear. What if it wasn't enough? What if telling your story didn't change nothing at all? The school board never said my name. They never acknowledged what really happened. They handled it like a PR issue, not a human life. Meanwhile, my name was being dragged through forums, Facebook groups, even in whispers at the grocery store. Chase's daddy, big man in town, old money, he spun a whole narrative about his wrongfully accused son, put up billboards, did interviews, hired a lawyer who spoke with that calm, calculated tone that makes lies sound like law. And the scariest part? Some folks believed him. That's when I learned. Truth ain't always louder than money, but it can be deeper. That's why I started the Westfield Files. I didn't tell nobody it was me, not even Mama. I just posted one story. My story, plain, unpolished, no edits, no filters. I described that classroom, the stale smell of old textbooks, the way Mr. Sullivan looked me in the eye and told me to let it go. I wrote about the night I came home with mascara streaks down my cheeks, how I curled up on the bathroom floor because I couldn't face my own bed, and I ended that post with one question. What did they silence in you? At first it was quiet. Just a few clicks, a comment here, a message there. Then, the flood came. Girls, boys, non-binary students, all ages, all colors, all stories. Some from my own class, folks I used to pass in the hall, some from way back, Westfield alumni from the 90s, even the 80s. They all said the same thing. I thought I was the only one. That's when I knew. This wasn't about me anymore, this was about the rot, and the rot ran deep. See, Westfield was never just a school. It was a machine. A well-oiled, reputation-polishing, secret-burying machine. And it had a long history of eating people like me alive. One girl told me about a teacher who used to follow her to her car after drama club, said the school made her sign an NDA for her protection. Another boy said he tried to file a report after a coach crossed a line, and they drug tested him instead. Like he was the problem, and the more stories I published, the angrier that town got. Not at the school, at me. The same people who used to smile at me in church, bring casseroles to my mama's doorstep. Now they were saying I was dividing the community, that I was ruining good men's lives. But it was never about ruin, it was about truth. I didn't want revenge. I wanted change. Real, structural, ugly change that makes people uncomfortable type change. But you can't fix a system that refuses to see it's broken. And then came the knock. Late night. Rain hitting the window like tiny fists. I opened the door and there was an envelope. No name, no return address, just a single USB stick inside. I almost didn't look at it, but something told me I had to. Inside were documents, emails, staff memos. One file was titled, Student Complaint Patterns, 2014-2024. They had a whole system for flagging reports and burying them, not resolving, not investigating, just moving the student, or quietly reassigning the staff. I couldn't breathe, because what Madison found in that file changed everything. This wasn't a few bad apples. This was a blueprint. And Westfield, it was just one piece, the tip of a much larger iceberg. So I went public. No more hiding behind a blog. No more initials. I put my face to the story, went on national TV, told everything, the room, the shame, the threats, the fear, the silence. And you know what? That's when the tide turned. See, people don't always believe words on a screen, but they believe pain when it looks them in the eye. And just like that, I wasn't the only one with a mic anymore. More survivors stepped forward. Some sued, some testified, some just spoke, for the first time in their lives. And while Westfield still hasn't publicly apologized, while Chase's father still runs his campaign, while some folks still cross the street when they see me coming, I don't regret a single word. Because this story, it ain't just mine. It belongs to every person who was ever told to be quiet. Every student who walked those halls feeling invisible. Every black girl who was called too loud, too sensitive, or too fast, just for telling the truth. And now I carry them with me. In every keynote I give. In every law I help rewrite. In every young voice I amplify. Because I learned something through all this. They can silence a student, but they can't silence a movement. And now I want to ask you, what would you have done if you were Madison? Should schools be held criminally accountable for hiding abuse? I need to know. Because silence don't protect the innocent. It protects the powerful. And if you thought Westfield had secrets, wait till you hear about the girl who uncovered a crime ring inside her school district. Hit like if you believe Madison deserved justice. Subscribe for more stories that uncover the truth, no matter how powerful the enemy. 'Cause this ain't the end. This is just the beginning.